Welcome to the Lytes Out podcast. This is Chris Lytes Out Lytle, and this is our journey to document the history of mixed martial arts. I have brought with me my friend, the MMA detective Mike Davis, and together we will preserve the history and hear some great stories from the world in the era of the no holds barred. Thank you and enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lytes Out Podcast. I am the MMA detective, Mike Davis. We've got a very special treat today. We've got a guy that literally just came off the set from The Ultimate Fighter, season 31, Kurt Holobaugh. Kurt, man, absolute pleasure. Sincerely appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank y'all for having me.
All right, well, here, let's get this out of the way. Plugs. I know you've got 2 gyms. Why don't we start with how people could find you?
Yeah, so we definitely have 2 gyms, Amite, Louisiana, Franklin, Louisiana. We're on a Grace United Team JUCAL. I got Facebook pages. You can Google us. Also, my Instagram page, Kurt the Hurt Holobaugh. Give me a like, give me a follow. Also on Facebook. Yeah, keep up with me.
All right, good. So, Kurt, obviously just coming off The Ultimate Fighter. First and foremost, how was the press coming off of it? Were you inundated with interviews, or was it seemed kind of more of a low-key season? But why don't you tell us your experience?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a low-key season coming off of it, because even, only close family and friends out of my gym actually knew that I had went, right? Because I had to get a lot of people to cover my shifts at the gym, and, my wife had to take care of the kids. So only people close inside my circle kind of knew. We wasn't really allowed to say where we was at the time. And then after I came home from it, still kind of the same, a few people knew where I was at, but of course nobody knows the results.
All right. So you had a 2-year layoff prior to going on. How do you maintain staying on their radar? How do you get that phone call?
So I just stay in touch with my manager at Sucker Punch Entertainment, Brian Butler, Brian Hamper, Chris Creech. I stay in touch with those guys, I'm always hitting them up, and I'm like, hey man, can there's a Bellator card coming up, can you give me a spot? There's PFL card coming up. Can you give me a spot? And man, we had a lot of those type deals that was falling through. I even signed a contract with EagleFC when Khabib was doing his shows. I want to say it was the first of the year in 2021, maybe, signed right after I just came out to XFC because they went under. I was in the finals in a tournament over there. And XFC went under, signed with Eagle, and I'm trying to get something. They offered me a fight or two. I would say yes, and then boom, the fight would never happen. So one day I'm sitting in the gym, and I think it was Chris Screech hit me up and he said, hey man, just sent you an application for the next Ultimate Fighter season to your email. I think this is going to be a good opportunity. Go check it out, fill it out. I got your interview Thursday. And I'm like, well, okay, well, never really thought about going to the Ultimate Fighter, man, because I'm thinking I'm way past Ultimate Fighter stuff and all like that, And of course, it was kind of the theme of the season. I was like the exact guy they were looking for. They were looking for guys that have been in the UFC that maybe have gotten released or didn't do well to bring back.
Not matched properly. That's a or unfavorable matchups. Just kind of ran into a hard road, and could easily work their way back in. So go ahead.
So so they hit me up, man. I started thinking about it, and I'm like, well, really, man, I got so much going on right now. I got 2 gyms. Me and my wife are running. I got kids, and I'm thinking, I haven't fought in 2 years. I don't want to go to the show and get my ass whooped. Can I hang with the high level guys anymore? Because, I train every day, and that's the perks of owning 2 gyms is I'm going to train every day with my guys. And I've also got pro guys, amateur guys that I'm coaching every day, getting these guys ready for fights too. And I said, screw it, man. My son was like, Dad, you need to take this fight. My wife was, you need to take this opportunity. And of course, some of my students like Preston said, man, if you worried about, we'll cover the gym. No, don't worry about the gym, man. You need to take this opportunity. You need to get out there and show the world. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just see where it goes.
Well, and boom. It's a little different when a child looks in her father's eyes and tells him he needs to fight.
Yeah, for sure. And now that my kids are getting older, man, when I started fighting, my daughter, I don't even think was born. I have a 15-year-old daughter right now. She's my oldest, and she wasn't even born yet. So that just shows you how long I've been fighting. And now my kids are growing up. I got a 15, 12, 10, 9, 3. You know, me and my wife, we have 5 kids total together right now. And yeah, so my kids are older now. They're able to really know what's going on. They're able to really see who I am and what I do.
So let's talk about the Ultimate Fighter House, the experience. What was it like being sequestered? I hear mixed reviews about it.
For me, it wasn't that bad. I really mentally prepared myself for the worst thing in the world, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking I'm going to go here. It's going to be the worst thing in the world, and it's going to suck. But, you know, mentally preparing myself for it, I think it wasn't as bad as I thought. Of course, finding good guys in a house to bond with and communicate with is very important. A lot of guys talk about, man, I'm not going there to make friends, but in a sense, you kind of need to if you want to survive in that house. If you want to not go crazy and be one of those guys that are calling Dana saying, hey, man, I want to go home, you know. So it was cool to kind of get with a lot of guys in the house. Plus, we had really cool guys in the house. You know, Jason Knight, Roosevelt Roberts, Austin Hubbard was my roommates. You know, and then we had a bunch of other guys that I met along the way in there. All really super cool guys.
Your first fight representing, well, here, let's talk about the pick. When they started picking the teams, was it kind of like grammar school? You didn't want to be the last pick. Like what was kind of going through your head?
No, honestly, didn't bother me one bit because really this wasn't your typical Ultimate Fighter, right? They didn't do the seeding and the picking like they normally would, right?
Old and new.
Yeah. So they kind of once we picked teams, right? Once we got selected to Chandler, Dana said, all right, so tomorrow you'll do a quick training session with your coaches, and your coaches are going to rank you and put you in an order. And then we're going to seed you by the order that you're picked in. So me personally, I figured I was going to be number 4. All right. Because I think you started off with now, just for the simple fact that, man, I technically didn't have a UFC win yet. And you got Austin, you got Roe, and you got Jason, who all have won, you know, several UFC fights and had pretty good UFC careers. Now, I don't know, my personal pick, I would have probably put like Roosevelt Roberts first. Maybe Austin second, Jason third, me fourth. That would have been my picks.
Okay. Well, your first fight was against Lee Hammond. You win by guillotine in the second round. Technically, your first win under the UFC confines. Was there a lot of mental pressure going into that fight?
There was a little bit. It wasn't too much. I think one of the most pressuring things was at that time we were 5-0. So our team has won 5 fights at this time. Now I'm up and I'm fighting not just any guy. I'm fighting the guy that everybody made a big deal about when Connor showed up to Vegas with supposedly 3 of his guys, and the UFC's kicking guys off the show. So and really it was just Lee, just one guy. And, you know, so I got matched up with Lee. He was our number 1 pick. I'm the number 4th pick. And I know it's a big fight. I hear a lot of good things about Lee going through the house from the other team. And everybody said the dude was solid. So I'm like, all right, man, well, we're going to have to find out. And definitely the biggest guy in the house, I can tell you that much. He was the one that came in weighing the most. I know they had a little bit of trouble getting him down. They had all their nutritionists and guys helping him cut weight and stuff like that. But he was definitely on the bigger side. Strong, really good, really talented. But yeah, man, I had to just weather that early storm and show why I'm a true veteran of the game and come back and get that win.
Right. And Jason Knight, he, you know, under traditional tough rule set, Jason Knight actually going up a weight class. He normally fought at 45 and he's up at 55. And like, if you're up a weight class, it's easy to see who's struggling to make weight. And that's kind of the guy you snipe in order to get there. It brought the regional scene to life in regards to Louisiana, because when they went in there and they asked you guys, hey, who do you want to fight? What makes the best matchup? both of you guys both said each other's name, and one of the most respectful ways of making a fight possible.
Yeah, for sure. Me and Jason talked about it. We're like, hey, man, look, I think we need to give our fans back home, as well as Dana and all the fans in the UFC, what they want. They need to see this fight. This has been a fight in the making for 10 to 11 years. We were supposed to fight back, I want to say 2012-ish, early 2012. We were supposed to fight on a local promotion in Mississippi. Fight never happened. We always kind of stayed close, talk to each other every time we see each other. And then, we get this chance on the biggest stage in the world. So we decided to say, hey, look, you don't shoot a takedown, I don't shoot a takedown. We go out there and let's just
let it rip.
throw hands. Let's give the best fight we possibly can. So, man, we shook hands on it. And as you see how that fight played out, we both lived up to our word and threw bombs.
Dude, Jason Knight, he, as a human being, is so unique. Like, he is just a genuine, uniquely human being that lives by a code.
Yeah, man, look, I love Jason. Like I said, we've known each other for a long time. We've always been, friends. Hey, what's up, man? Let's get a picture whenever we see each other at the local shows, talk a good bit. But once we got into that house, I felt like I really had a friend in the house, and we got closer and closer, being there for, 6 weeks, right? I mean, we're cooking for each other. We're literally sharing bunks. I'm on the top bunk, he's on the bottom bunk in the same room, as well as all in a row in the same room on a bunk bed on the other side. So, I mean, we're all 5 veteran lightweights sharing the room. So we're getting close, man. I'm eating all Jason's Jolly Ranchers that he's bringing into the house. And yeah, we got real close. So now I definitely consider Jason a friend.
In our interview with him, we did it over a year ago. He said that he knows he could make 35, but it wouldn't be fun. Man, I think if he dropped to 135, he could make a serious run in the UFC.
Yeah, he would be a huge 135er. Now, here's this. The Ultimate Fighter actually brought Jason onto the show to be a 135. He wasn't actually selected to be a 55. When they brought him in and said, all right, Jason, here's all your stuff, it had 135 on it. Jason said, hey, I'm not doing 135. He said, I'll do 55, but I can't do 135. So, yeah, he was actually brought on to be a 135er. But, yeah, that Jason Knight at 135 would be scary for anybody in the UFC. Man.
His chin, his durability, his cardio, his willing to bang. Like, you could make fight of the night with that guy every single time at 135 without issue.
100%.
Okay. So you win the Ultimate Fighter. You get obviously your hand raised in the finale. What were the thoughts going through your head?
Just, man, it's been a long time coming. Like, not that I ever let anybody down, but I felt like I owed a lot to, my friends and family that's been by my side the entire time, that's been by my side, win, lose, or draw, and especially the biggest losses. I want to say one of my biggest losses ever was, I want to say, UFC 230 in Madison Square Garden, where I fought Shane Burgos. I had a lot of friends, a lot of family come out. The first time a kid of mine has ever been to a fight live, I brought my son Zaden to the show. My current wife now was at the show. And that was a fight that they thought that I won for a split second. So I gave them like a false hope in a sense, right? So I dropped Shane Burgos and I'm on top, I'm punching him, and the crowd goes crazy. And my family and friends think I won the fight, and then boom, I just got arm bars. So they're like, wait a minute, what happened? And I put him through such a high and such a low at that moment. So I'm figuring like, now I'm back again. It's the TD guard, and it's the same atmosphere, man. The crowd's going crazy. And for me to be able to come back and get such a huge victory like I did, and be able to walk by the tunnel that they were at and hold my trophy up, was the best feeling in the world.
Finally threaded that needle, man.
For sure. So, yeah, it was a good one. Never felt better. And like I said, they deserve it just as much.
Let's talk about your MMA beginnings. What drew you into the sport? How do you wind up in a gym? I think Raphael Ellwanger is your first coach. Am I correct?
Yeah, still my coach till today.
First and last coach. Wow. How do you meet Raphael?
All right. So, well, first off, real quick, just to get into the sport, I was always if it was a fan or if it was anything to do with fighting, a movie or fight, boxing, kickboxing, I seen it on TV when I was a kid, I was entertained by it. Right. So, and I remember my mom and my parents or whatever ordering the Mike Tyson fights and then the Mike Tyson and Holyfield fights. And I was such a big fan of that. And I was so intrigued by, Mike Tyson and Holyfield boxing. So started moving on, and then boom, here comes the UFC with Royce Gracie and then Ken Shamrock and then Mark Coleman and then Tito Ortiz. And I'm like, I really started to grow interest in that. And definitely a huge fight fan. And I remember my parents would go rent the events from Blockbuster, and they would bring them home and they would watch them, on the weekends. And of course, I was intrigued by it. And right after I graduated high school, I had a couple guys that I heard that I went to high school with were cage fighting. And I'm thinking at this time, this is 2004, right? So they haven't even been an Ultimate Fighter yet. So the Ultimate Fighter doesn't exist. The UFC is still trying to get built off of the ground. And to me, I didn't really know the difference between UFC or these guys fighting in regional shows or local shows. So I started thinking, man, that's awesome. But I'm thinking at the same time, if they can do it, I can do it. Right. So I actually was an alarm technician for about 15, 16 years where I installed alarms, fire alarms, cameras, and I was doing a job right in my close to my hometown, Hammond, Louisiana. I was doing a job. And I look over and I see a big sign, Gracie Baja, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coming soon. And I'm thinking, that's it. I'm going there. I'm going to talk to that person. I'm going to tell them I want to fight. So, so right when it opened back up, I went over there, went in, talked to the owner, which was Raphael. And at this time, man, I have no fighting experience other than I'm a huge fan. Me and my cousin, we'd go out in the yard at night. We try moves on each other that we see on the TV. I see this guy, that's jiu-jitsu, and this is a triangle, and I'm out there, we're practicing devil legs and triangles in the yard at 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's the only fight experience I actually have. And just like, anybody, I walk in, hey, I want to fight, and he looks at me just like he would look at anybody. And all right, here, sign this waiver and come to the class. It's at 5 o'clock this evening. All right, I'll be there. And I did, man. I went to the class, started training, and took my first amateur fight a couple months after I started training.
With training, though, do you know how many? I mean, you're a gym owner. How many guys show up? I'm here to be on your fight team. They do one practice, you never see them again.
Yep, and yeah, exactly. I was one of those guys, but I was just one of those guys that were serious about it. And somebody that really wanted it. But yeah, you get that a lot, especially being a gym owner. I mean, there's always people calling and, hey, I want to be a fighter. I want to fight in the UFC. Can you train me to fight? And yep, our class time is this, and this, and just come to the class, man. We'll see what you got to start training. You got to train.
Kurt, you don't understand. I'm really angry. Like I have rage in me, and I'm going to be on your fight team. It's that, it is what it is, man. It is what it is.
Yeah, of course. You definitely get guys in here like that, but those are the guys that don't make it. So.
Yeah, you just hope somebody sticks around. So you go 8-0 as an amateur. You talked about, your first fight a few months later. You go 8-0 as an amateur. Your last amateur fight's against Lorenzo Washington. There's not much documentation that is available in regards to it. How would you describe your amateur career?
I thought I fought some pretty decently tough guys at amateur. I held a couple of championships, a couple amateur titles. So that last fight with Lorenzo Washington, that was actually a pretty big fight card. So it's kind of cool. I opened up my very first amateur fight in the Baton Rouge River Center. I think it was an organization called Louisiana Fighting Championship. So LFC or something like that. But man, when I say thinking back on it and being my first fight ever, it was almost like a UFC fight. It was huge. The River Center looked like it was sold out. I think it was like a tailgate party or something for the LSU football team, the LSU Tigers down here. And it was packed. So this was the first experience I got to fight. Big cage, big crowd, River Center. Loved it. Second fight, I went from fighting in the River Center to a rodeo arena. So I'm like, oh, man, this it's not quite the same as my first fight, but whatever. But my last fight against Lorenzo Washington was actually back in the River Center, and it was another pretty big card. And they actually had some pretty notable names like Kyle Bradley, Marcus Brimage, Sean Jordan was all on that card too. So it was a pretty big fight card. And I even said this is gonna be my last amateur fight. Hopefully I win so I can go pro. And that was actually for the USA MMA 155-pound amateur championship. So I beat Lorenzo Washington by knockout, and right after that in my amateur career, and look forward to going pro.
All right. So we had mentioned your original coach, Rafael Elwenger. When do you think that you earned his respect? At what point in your career?
I remember this. After my fourth amateur fight, I remember he came in and he looked at me and he said, "Can't wait to see you in the UFC one day." And I'm like, well, man, that's only a distant dream, right? Because I'm 22 years old and fighting amateur, and now the UFC is actually starting to build. So this is, I want to say 2008, right? So 2008. And so the Ultimate Fighter's been out for a couple of years. UFC is growing, but right now it's only a dream. And I'm thinking, man, I'll probably never make it to the UFC. But when he came in and said that, that's when I think he really thought that, hey, this kid's got it. You know, he might be the guy to bring to the UFC.
Yeah, he planted that seed, man. Yeah, somebody you admire, you look up to. When they kind of, put a little bit of water on that seed, it's amazing what can grow. Yep.
Absolutely.
So did you ever, like in your amateur career, obviously not a lot of documentation, did you ever fight on those Joe Ancona shows?
No, never. Joe Ancona actually wasn't around at that time whenever I was fighting amateur. I don't know his full story, but I know a lot about it, Joe. And he's back to doing shows now with Tim Crater. They do a little partner show called Bayou Fighting Championship. And sometimes I put my guys on their show to fight. But as far as fighting on his shows back when I was amateur, I never did.
Okay. So Tim Crater, yourself, Jason Knight, there's actually quite a few guys, from your area. Alan Belcher, Rich Clemente.
Yeah.
Kyle Bradley, obviously you mentioned him earlier. Some of the guys like John Dixon, Jason Knight, Alan Belcher, Rich Clemente, did you ever have any interaction with them?
I did. As a matter of fact, whenever me and Jason was supposed to fight in like 2012, right after that fight didn't happen, I won a couple more fights. And once I wound up getting that call to the UFC, I remember Alan called me one day, and I think this is before Jason or before he had anybody go to the UFC. So I know Alan called me one day and he just wanted to talk to me, and it's like, yeah, man, you're really inspiring my guys. Maybe even one day I might want to get you down here so you can come talk to some of the guys and train some of the guys so we can show them that, it's possible to get to the UFC. And it's the same thing with Rich Clemente. I've trained with Rich quite a few times. I went over to his gym, trained him for some fights, back in the day to get ready. And so same thing with Kyle Bradley, man. I've trained with almost every one of those guys.
That's great. That's important, man. Louisiana isn't known for being the hotbed of MMA because I think it boils down to there's not a strong wrestling community there yet. But like when all the gyms work with each other, guys like you are able to get the opportunities that they deserve. For
sure. We definitely got a lot of guys that have came out of Louisiana to the UFC. We got a lot of guys currently right now that's from Louisiana in the UFC.
Yeah. So you guys are starting to make a name for yourself. If you guys look at Louisiana, look at Arkansas. I mean, Arkansas, there's almost no representation there. So, you guys are fighting an uphill battle, but you're getting there. You guys are 100% getting there.
Thank you.
So Gilroy was the promoter for USA MMA Stacked. I know you fought for him a couple times. How was he as a promoter?
He's a little he was the one that was a little on that shady side, you know. I heard a lot of things about Gil, but to me, always a pretty nice guy, you know. I think always a nice guy. There was one time that I think he set me up to fight, and my opponent didn't show. I drove like 4 hours away. My opponent never showed, and I think that he knew my opponent wasn't going to show, but didn't want to tell me or just wanted to play it off like, hey, well, he just didn't show up. But I think he knew the whole time. And another thing, I won some championships for him. He never gave me my titles, right? So my fourth fight that we talked about when Raphael come in and said, hey, I can't wait to see you in the UFC, that fight was for an amateur championship. He took it when I got to the back and said, hey, man, I only got one belt. I need to use it. I'm going to get one in the mail. I'm going to send it to you. So I'm like, all right, cool. You know, at this time, I really want that belt. Like, I've never had a championship belt before. You know, I'm 22 years old, 21 years old, and just won an MMA fight that resulted in me getting a championship belt. Back in the day growing up, I was a big wrestling fan, and I would always make like a duct tape belt or something. So I always making my own belts for backyard wrestling. And now I finally got a real belt that I'm holding in my hand, and he takes it and never sends me one. So I'm like, all right, whatever. You know, I go on, I win some more championships from other organizations. But that last fight in USA MMA was for the 155-pound amateur championship. I won that fight that night, got the belt. As soon as I go to the back, he said the same thing. He said, hey, man, I need to take the belt. I gotta use this one for the next fight, but I'm going to send you one. And I'm like, man, you said that about the last belt. But here, whatever, man, I'm going pro anyways. Never seen a belt. So,
Dude, you could have been like Tim Sylvia, wearing it to pump gas, going shopping with it.
yeah, for sure. No, if I would have had those, I'd be 2 more belts on the mantle.
That's it. Big belt buckle. Well, your first pro fight, March 12th, 2011. It's Derek Brooks. Were you the headline that night?
I was. That was actually at Houma, Louisiana.
You were a huge ticket seller at this point then.
I was starting to get there, man. You know, I didn't have really a huge, or I don't have like a huge family with tons of aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, or whatever. But, you know, I was starting to get a little bit of a following. Of course, my family always came. And, yeah, I was fighting. I actually dropped from 155 pounds or 170 pounds in my amateur career to 155 pounds. In my last amateur fight, that was my debut at 155 pounds. And I'm like, okay, so I'm dropping back. I'm dropping to 155, and I'm going to go pro. Well, I wind up taking that fight back up at 170 pounds. This guy, Derek Bro, was a pretty well-known jiu-jitsu guy. He was a brown belt under Tim Crater. And at the time, I think I was a blue belt. So I was a little nervous about it. I'm like, man, I'm about to go fight this brown belt. And
he's 2-0. He's 2-0 as well. And he had a real good amateur career.
Yep. So I knew
that's not an easy fight. Yeah, that's not an easy fight, man.
But my coach, Raphael, he said, you know what? I kind of like this fight. Let's do it. I'm like, okay, cool. And yeah, I wind up getting the submission with 30 seconds into the fight, I'd say, by guillotine choke.
Yeah, guillotine 39 seconds into the first round. That was also, I think that was his last fight as well. In July 9th, 2011, XFC, I think you're the main event again. Phil Daru, you win by armbar. He's out of Pitbull Training and Fitness. You're 2-0. You go into your third fight a few weeks later. Felix's Louisiana Bad Boy Promotions. You got Phil, was it Soloway?
Yep, Swallow or Solo, something like that.
Dude, it's one of those Louisiana names.
Yeah. Yeah, so the cool thing about this fight, like this guy went pro, but this guy was Dustin Poirier's last amateur fight. We fought on the same night, night at when I fought my fourth amateur fight for USA MMA. Dustin Poirier fought the same guy, Paul Swallow, the same night. And that was Dustin's last amateur fight. So I remember this guy turned pro and he was supposed to be like a good wrestler. And I'm like, all right, so yeah, I'll fight this guy. And same thing, you know, I hit him with something, he shoots, I guillotine him, another 30-second guillotine choke.
Making things look easy. This is also part of a tournament where Booker Arthur is on the other side of the tournament, but the tournament gets moved to the XFC. Oh, I think, it gets moved to the XFC October 29th. So you went from July to October without completing the tournament in the promotion. What happened with that?
They didn't really tell us a whole bunch about it. I think that was just Felix trying to set some stuff up, trying to do a tournament. I don't think they ever turned nothing out of it.
So at the XFC, you fight the winner on the other side, Booker Arthur. Up until this point, you've never been to the end of a fight.
Yep.
And it's super important to see what kind of gas tank you got. You win by decision.
Yeah, so and like you said, like my first 3 fights, 30 seconds, a minute and a half, 30 seconds. So I'm like, I done ended 3 fights less than what a professional round time even is, right? So, but this fight was weird with Booker. I remember going into this fight and they're greasing us up and they're like, all right, guys, 3 4-minute rounds. And I look at them, I'm like, 3 4-minute rounds? This is professional fight. It's 5-minute. They're like, no, it's 4-minute rounds tonight. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And I completely dominated the fight. A lot of submission attempts. I want to say I triangled a guy, I armbarred a guy, guillotined a guy. And a lot of times the time ran out on me. So I feel like, if we would have had that extra minute per round, maybe I could have got the job done inside the distance. But yeah, man, Booker was actually a tough guy. He was a guy that fought Bellator at the time.
He's durable.
So,
He's real durable. Yeah.
It was a big step up from what I have been fighting. So, yeah, got the victory by decision.
You really don't know, like as a coach, you don't know what a fighter has until you see him go the entirety of a fight, because there's going to be bumps in the road. If he's dogging it in training, it's going to come out. Like talent gets exposed when there's a lack of cardio.
Yep.
So that's certain. Yeah,
you can be the best fighter in the world, right? Be the absolute best fighter in the world, but if you can't fight the time you need to fight, then it doesn't matter.
So you're at kind of a base right now, which is important to have. Whoever's helping you get your fights, they're helping you get your confidence. And then they throw JZ Pennington at you in the XFC April 7th, 2012. Yep. JZ Pennington at this time is 20-15-1. He's out of Gladiator Academy. JZ Pennington is one of these independent grind guys that fights a who's who. He is legit in regards to fighting somebody at this level. It's not an easy fight.
Absolutely. And JC's a guy that was fighting back when I was on the outside looking in. Whenever I first started, I seen JC fighting. And like I said, I was amateur at the time. I probably didn't even have a fight. And he was pro. And I'm seeing all the wars that he's getting in. He's one of Rich Clemente's guys that were coming up and training a lot with Rich. And I remember when we signed that fight, I'm like, man, this is the biggest fight of my life. This guy's got, 20 plus MMA fights. He fought on Showtime, on Elite XC, I think. And definitely the biggest fight to date coming up to that fight.
So Kurt, if you're a gatekeeper in the UFC, that means you can make a living and earn some money, pay for a house. If you're a gatekeeper on the independent grind, you're a mean son of a bitch.
Yep.
And that's what JC Pennington is. Like, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you're mean, you're gritty, and you're there because, you've got like self-worth. You're there to prove something to yourself. And that's JC Pennington.
Yeah, definitely a big time veteran when I fought him. A Louisiana legend, I can tell you that much, because everybody knew who JC Pennington was. And that's probably one of the biggest fights ever to happen on the Louisiana regional circuit. So, yeah, that was a good one for me, man. That was a step up in competition for sure. I'm fighting a guy that has, 20 plus fights, been all around the world. So,
how's it end?
I want to say I finished a triangle in the 3rd round. So, completely dominate the fight. Right?
So now listen to this. Booker Arthur, you make the decision. As a coach, you think, okay, we're going to give him another step up. Let's see how Kurt reacts. You find a finish. That means you found another gear.
Yep. And yeah, keep in mind, this is the first time going 5 minutes in a round, because the last fight against Booker was 4 minutes. So yeah, and I can definitely feel it a little bit. I can definitely feel the difference, and I can feel the difference in what a real veteran guy is, because JC was not easy to put away. I remember hitting JC with a lot of good stuff, and I couldn't get him out of there. And I remember being in the third round, I knew I had him hurt, and I had a guy sitting on the outside cage side. And I remember I was going for the triangle, and he told me like a little certain detail. It was like switch to the other hip. And I remember I listened to him, and I switched the other hip, locked the triangle. So I'm like, appreciate that, J Mark.
So now you're listening to your coaches in the corner, which is not easy to do in the beginning.
No, I've always been that guy that really, whatever my coaches tell me to do, I really try to listen,
Let's talk about some of the guys you've worked out with in the past. Your striking coach, Jimmy Mills.
Yep. So I met Jimmy during the Titan FC fight when I was fighting Desmond Breann out in Mobile, Alabama. Right. So big fight for a big regional promotion. And Rafael and Jimmy trained together years ago whenever Rafael first come to the U.S. from Brazil. Right. So real quick story about Rafael Elwanger. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Carlos Gracie Jr. He came to the U.S., I want to say somewhere 2005, 2006, maybe. I could be wrong. And when he came down here, he was training with all those guys like Rich, Allen, Jimmy Mills. He was down there in like the Slidell area training with all those guys on the coast. And whenever Titan put that show in Mobile, Alabama, I was fighting Desmond Breann. Raphael wanted to go up a week early because he said, hey, look, I got Jimmy Mills up here. He's a guy. I'm going to introduce you to him. Really good stand-up. Did a lot of boxing, kickboxing around Holland and stuff like that. And
Overeem. He worked out with Overeem. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. He was roommates with Overeem for a while.
That's wild.
So, yeah, man, we get over there. That's the first time meeting Jimmy. We go to his gym. I trained the whole week leading up to that fight with Desmond Breann. And ever since then, I've had Jimmy Mills in my corner and worked out with Jimmy Mills every fight.
Josh Weems.
I just met Josh probably not that long ago, and he hit me up. Which Josh Weems, he always comes up to me at the local fights, right? Because he's actually a real good. He's a fan of my son, so he's always coming up, man. Look, and I remember the first video he ever commented on was I think my son was holding mitts for me, and it was like legit. He's holding, I'm cracking, and He commented something on that, and I remember the next couple of times we've seen him on the local show. He said, hey, man, can I go introduce myself to your son? I'm like, yeah, man, for sure. So he was a big fan of my son. I'm like, I'm telling my son, he actually fought in the UFC, not that long ago. So, of course, my son, he loves that type of stuff. So he actually, I invited him and say, hey, man, anytime you want to come train. And he came and trained with us a couple months ago, and then he just actually came back out, I want to say, this past Friday and got some rounds in with us. So really nice guy, good guy.
You're referencing your son Zaden, I believe, correct? Yep. Now Zaden is also competing quite a bit.
He is. He's about to be 13, but he's been competing in jiu-jitsu competitions since he was 5 years old, and then slowly moving up from jiu-jitsu competitions, which he still competes to this day in jiu-jitsu competitions. We started getting him jiu-jitsu matches inside a cage, right, on the local MMA shows. So it's actually pretty cool because these kids they're giving them their walkouts. They get to walk out to the music just like any fighter of the night gets to do. So they get into the cage, they grapple. If there's no submission in the 5 minutes or the 3 minutes, whatever the time limit is, okay, it could be a draw. But you submit the kid, then you win the match. And man, I can't even tell you how many of those he's done. I want to say his first one was probably he was 8 or 9. And then I don't even know how many he's done since then. And then slowly we started saying, hey, well, okay, let's do some boxing. So I registered him with USA Boxing. He's currently 1-0 in boxing. We don't make it out to a bunch of shows, but he won his debut. We've been to a couple other shows, but sometimes it's just hard to get matched for, boxing. And the last show we showed up, his opponent didn't show up. So, but he's done some boxing matches in the cage. And he's done some kickboxing matches in the cage. And hopefully here coming up, he's got a rematch with the last kid he fought in the cage. And it was a kickboxing match, but this kid was really, really good. Actually beat him with a spinning back kick to the liver. So
oh, no way.
Yeah. So now we're coming for a rematch in an MMA fight, right? But and this is the thing about my son. He's always been very small. He's on the smaller side, right? So he's close to being 13, and he's still only like 85 pounds. So the kid he's fighting, I want to say he's 11 or 12, and about the same, about 80 pounds. Well, his coach made a huge deal because the way we work with kids, we're not going to make kids cut weight. Okay.
No.
100% against making kids cut weight. And whenever I talk to promoters, and I got a very good friend of mine, a promoter, Justin Vernon, that does the shows down here in Homa, that I'm always putting guys on his card. And he's always putting not just my kids on the card, he's putting some of my kids out of the gym on his card for MMA fights and grappling matches. And I like to do that. I like to get these kids out there that really want to fight and get them matches. So we come in, and I always tell Justin, hey man, I got Zaden. He's around 80 pounds. Okay, cool. So normally the kids don't even have to show up to weigh-ins and weigh. We just, if anybody wants to see a weigh, we'll break out a scale the night of the fight. Yeah, step one.
Who cares? Yeah, just make sure it's even. Just make it even.
Close,
yeah.
Close in range, you know. Well, we show up, and I actually went to the weigh-ins this day. You know, I got 8 guys fighting on the card, including my son. And my son's fighting in a Muay Thai match. And we get there, and they check his weight, and he's shoes, shirt, everything. He's 83 pounds. And the coach, take everything off. Let me see what you weigh with everything. And I'm looking at this chick, and I'm thinking, who the fuck is this? Like, is she really about to make a big deal? So he takes everything off, and he's like 82 pounds. All right. She's like, oh, you unprofessional. You don't know how to make weight. And I'm like, bitch, this is my kid. Yeah, you're not going to talk. I'm like, I told Justin that he is around 80 pounds. Around 80 pounds is 82 pounds. Like, and then even for amateurs in Louisiana, you get a 2-pound allowance.
Wait, you know what's bogus? If you would have said he's 75 pounds and he's 82, you said 80, he's 80 pounds. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So for sure. So she makes a big deal out of it. And she's like, oh, your boy better pray because he's going to get knocked out tomorrow night. And I'm thinking,
the fuck?
That's
an adult?
This is not like one of my fighters. This is my kid. Like, you're lucky you're a female. But anyways, he did, man. But like I said, and I knew this kid was good. The kid been doing taekwondo since he was 3-4 years old and can kick every different direction. And I even said, look, my son ain't no slouch. He's a fucking beast. And so, yeah, man, my son loses the fight, got hit with a spinning back kick in round 2.
It's part of life. It's part of life.
After my son dropped him. So my son drops him in round 2, gets the 8 count, right? So I'm like, oh, we needed this because now we win in this round. We got the 8 count. Next thing you know, spinning back kick. My son can't answer the count. So no big deal. But now I'm like, we stepped into your world. Now come step into our world. So now we have an MMA fight scheduled. Normal MMA, you got small gloves, shin pads, only thing, no head strikes. Everything else, fine. So I'm like.
Was the woman performing weigh-ins a part of that other kid's camp?
Yeah, I want to say it's his mom or coach.
I
know she had, I don't know her name. I know she fought in the UFC before, but I'm like, look, I understand, but like, this is kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For USA boxing, you have a range. You have a 5-pound range in USA boxing for kids, right? If you're over the 5 pounds, you can't fight. If you're under the 5 pounds, you can't fight. There was an incident with my son where his first boxing match, he didn't weigh enough. So there was like, hey man, just go tell him, go drink some water. So I gave him 2 bottles of water. I said, Zaden, chug it. You got to chug it if you want to fight, man. So we actually had to put on 2 pounds to be able to fight. So, I mean, we've had it both ways. So now, here, October 7th, I got a bunch of guys on the card, but my son supposedly, they said 85.5 pounds. If he's anything over 85, they're not fighting. So we're working on not making my son cut weight, but I'm working on making sure he ain't eating junk. He's playing football right now, so it's hot out here. I think he'll be fine. So hopefully we get that match because I need that one back.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you know what, man? That's a bonding moment between you and your son as well. Like, it's super important. You kind of get to see the grit of your child. Is he wrestling? You got him in wrestling as well?
So he doesn't actually wrestle for a school or for a team. He's into wrestling. He's done a few wrestling matches actually inside a cage. For Jimmy Mills' promotion out in Alabama, Jimmy had a kid that said, hey, I don't have anybody that grapples Zaden, but I got a kid that wrestles at a wrestling. So, man, Zaden, he strapped up his singlet and he went into the cage and wrestled.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So Fight Force International, Will Crothers is your opponent. Yep. You rear naked choke him in 1:55. And I tell you what, you fight another really gritty veteran, June 30th, 2012. Ronnie Rogers. He's out of Finney's Hit Squad. He goes by Bam Bam. He's 12-9. He's somebody that he hits hard and he's aggressive.
Yep. So real quick, I fought Will Crothers in a replacement for Jason Knight. That's when I was supposed to fight Jason Knight. Really? And Jason got into a car wreck. So Will Crothers had just moved down and started training at Belcher's. So they put him into the fight to replace Jason Knight.
Okay. So there was the Jason Knight fight. That's in April. And then Ronnie Rogers, that's no small challenge either, man.
Man, let me tell you something about Ronnie Rogers. That dude threw me around that ring for the whole first round. Like, so strong. But here's the thing. He kind of came in on a short notice, too. I had somebody else I was supposed to fight, right? So this fight is supposed to be at 155 pounds. But the promoter called, said, hey, man, the only guy I got is a guy named Ronnie Rogers. Got a lot of fights, big record. But he can't make 155. Can you do 165? And I'm like, sure, let's do it. So I actually fought Ronnie at 165, and that dude threw me everywhere in that first round.
Wow. I mean, sometimes that's your best way to win. Let him tire himself out. Let him carry your weight.
Yeah, so there's actually, of course, there's videos almost all of these fights on YouTube and Google, but I remember specifically I armbar him. He picked me up, slammed me. I triangle him. He picked me up, slammed me. I arm-a-plata him. He picked me up, held me with one arm, and said, boom, slammed me. And I'm thinking, whew, dude, strong. How about happy ass out?
Well, yeah. I've seen him fight a few times live, and he's a truck. The guy's a truck, but also you're going to face that. Like, you're not going to have the ebb and flow of a normal fight, and you got to get through that.
Yeah, for sure. A tough one, but I got the job done.
That was rear naked choke in the second round. Wellington Brito. He's out of Chute Combat in Brazil. Dude, is there somebody managing you right now? Like, at this point in your career?
Yes, Sucker Punch Entertainment.
All right. So the fights that they set up for you, I'm just going to be direct. Sometimes when you get involved with a big organization like Sucker Punch, there's not a lot of love there. It's kind of, you got to do what you got to do. And then once you do it, then they kind of take over the ship. The structure that you had coming up until this point is absolutely fantastic for building a fighter and his confidence. Sure. Wellington Brito is a black belt out of Brazil. Another benchmark or box that you have to check in order to prove that you're UFC ready.
For sure. And, at this time, what am I? I think I'm 7-0 right now, right? 7-0 as a professional. I'm starting to actually start looking at some of these rankings, and people are starting to say, hey, you win this fight, you're probably going to go to the UFC. And I'm thinking, maybe, I didn't ever thought about that. Back when Raphael told me years ago he could see me in the UFC, I thought that was just not a joke, but, just something to think about. But now it's starting to almost be a reality. And I wasn't managed by anybody at this time, right? We're just still kind of doing our own fights. I got the promoters. Now, of course, the promoter that we're fighting for in XFC, very good friend, and he's trying to bring in guys that has good records, guys that, good matchups for me, but guys that are going to look good when I beat them. And that Wellington Brito, he was tough, man. We didn't know a whole bunch about him. We knew he was from Brazil. We looked up a couple fights. And I remember walking out for that fight, and I remember the announcer saying, hey, this might be the last fight you see Kurt fight before he goes to the UFC. And I'm like, dang, man, this is starting to get real. Like I might go to the UFC. So
So who was helping you get your fights?
Raphael. I had Raphael, another coach of mine, Scott Smith, that was helping a lot. And you know, a lot of the promoters that we would fight for, you know, we would be pretty tight with, pretty close, and we wanted to make sure, you know, we never asked for a duck. We never asked for a bomb, but we wanted somebody actually good. And I'm actually doing the same thing right now with one of my fighters. You know, I'm trying to build that same path where we don't want ducks. We can't keep fighting bums. We need guys that are going to make us get to the top.
Right, with an opportunity to win as well. So it's not like,
Yep.
you know, you're coming in as a clear B-side, but, you know, somebody that there's an opportunity for both opponents. Scott Smith is somebody that's in your corner quite a bit.
Yeah, he is. So, yeah, Scott's in my corner. So a little quick rundown on Scott. Scott was the very first guy I submitted whenever I came and started training at Gracie Baja Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And I remember, keep in mind, this is my first week. I'm in here. The only thing I know is what me and my cousin practice out in the yard at 2:00 in the morning. So I knew what a triangle was. And I don't know why, I was always good at triangles. So I remember we did like a little in-gym competition the night that I went, like my first week there. And I tapped Scott Smith with triangle. And he got up and he's like, "Where you train at?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, you train somewhere. Where you train at?" I'm like, "Man, this is my first week, dude." He's like, "We're going again after class." And I'm like, "God damn, this dude hates me already." So long story short, we did go again after class. He tapped me with an arm bar, but ever since then, when he really figured out, all right, this kid just might have some talent. He never trained nowhere, but Scott's a good guy, man. He's a local firefighter and paramedic. He helps me out with a lot of strength and conditioning, a lot of meal prep stuff. Real knowledgeable guy, and I've had him in my corner ever since.
Yeah, it's like, well, we turn on the backyard lights and we make a dojo back there, sir. You know what I mean? That's what about SD Dumas?
I just met SD for the first time, training for this last fight for the Ultimate Fighter final. He's out of Port City MMA, which is my coach Jimmy Mills' gym. And yeah, super cool guy, real humble guy, real good stand up. And I got to work with him for the first time a few weeks ago.
That's right. Brandon Wells, your wrestling coach?
Yes. So Brandon Wells, I want to say he just turned 21. So he came to my gym probably about 2 years ago. He was already a blue belt when he came to my gym from a local karate studio we had down the road that's already shut down. But years ago, he got his blue belt. So he's from Louisiana, but his dad's like in the Army. So he's lived overseas for years. And he actually wrestled in Germany for like 9 years, growing up from a kid till, you know, early or late teens. So I guess he moved back, started going to college here in Louisiana, found my gym, came in, and got to talk to him. Really awesome, you know, young guy, and really good wrestling fundamentals. And I consider him as a wrestling coach now for me. He does wrestling practices for me, really good fundamentals. And he's actually undefeated right now as an amateur fighter.
That's excellent. That's excellent. You had Wesley Dunlap. I think he was a last-minute replacement for you.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, you know, what was that? My eighth professional fight. So it's starting to get hard to find guys to fight me, right? Because, you know, not a lot of guys are going to line up to fight an undefeated 7-0 or 8-0 guy. So I can't remember who we originally had for that fight, but yeah, Wesley Dunlap stepped up, took the fight on a short notice, and I defeated him and moved to 8-0. At this time, I had just signed with my first manager,
Lex McMahon.
Lex McMahon with Alchemist Management, which actually Charles McCarthy is the guy that reached out and found me. I remember he reached out, asked for my number, and I don't, maybe it was Facebook or whatever they had back then. But it could have been freaking, what was the other, the MySpace, I don't know. It was something that we had back then, some kind of social media. And he said, "Hey, man, I found you on YouTube. I've seen all your fights. I think you're in a really good position. I think you're a fight or two away from the UFC. I would like to talk to you about signing with our management group. And I talked to the coaches a little bit, and actually my guy Scott Smith said, man, I think this is something that you need to do. So I'm like, all right. So I wind up signing with Alchemist. And I think Charles McCarthy left Alchemist, and then Lex took over. So yeah, then Lex McMahon started managing me.
Okay. So Lex McMahon is a guy that, I mean, Titan FC. I mean, it's Titan, correct? Am I off on that?
Yep,
Okay.
Titan FC.
So it's Titan. Somebody that actually I hear, he and I've got some mutual friends, some people that he does business with. I've heard nothing but good things about the guy.
Yeah, I mean, we've had our fair share of problems with Lex throughout the years, but Lex is a good guy, man. He means well. He does a good job with Titan. And I mean, he's the one that got me my first shot at the UFC. So
I got you, Pat Healy, as well. Strike Force, January 12, 2013. Kind of an interesting way in regards to how this fight came about.
Yeah, so like I said,
I mean, Gilbert Melendez was his original opponent. He falls off. Jorge Masvidal replaced him. He falls off. You take it last minute.
Yeah, so Lex gives me a call one day, and I'm like 9-0 at this moment. He gives me a call and says, "Hey, bud, what you doing?" I said, not much, just hanging out. What's up? He says, so got you a big fight. He says, the final Strike Force card ever. He said, it's a tough opponent. And he said, look, if you do well, you'll go to the UFC. So he's like, you don't even have to win. You just have to do well. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm in. He's like, all right, it's Pat Healy. So I'm like, okay, I'm familiar with Pat Healy. I've been watching Strike Force, and I actually really like Strike Force.
Legend. Pat Healy at this moment's 28-16. But if you look at his record,
he's fought who's who.
Everybody. He's got a Hall of Fame record on the independent grind. He's legit. Go ahead.
And not only has he fought him, he's beat a lot of those guys, right? So not like he's fighting and losing to him, but yeah. So Gilbert Melendez is the Strike Force lightweight champion. Pat Healy's supposed to fight Gilbert Melendez for the lightweight title. Gilbert Melendez pulls out with injury, goes to the UFC. They're trying to find Pat Healy replacements. I step up, take that fight on a 10-day notice out in Oklahoma City. Final Strike Force, big card. I mean, you got I think DC was on the card. Anthony Smith was on the card. Roger Gracie was on the card. Nate Marquardt.
You're up a weight class.
Yeah, and I go back to 55. So yeah, so about halfway through my pro career, I dropped down to 45 and I started fighting 45. Trying to make the best and the smartest moves for myself to be able to go to the UFC. So yeah, definitely, I stepped back up, fight Pat Healy, who is not a small 155er, right? Good, durable, big guy, and man, like impressed the world. Like didn't get the job done. Lose my first fight ever by decision, but put on a hell of a show. And
your first loss, what's going on in your head?
Man, I took it well for a while, and then I want to say, a week or so after, I kind of broke down, and I was really, really mad. But I just felt like, still a lot of good came out of it, right? Because I'm in the back after the fight, and I'm getting all these texts, and I'm seeing articles come out that's everybody's so impressed. Sean Shelby comes to the back and says, how would you like to come to UFC? And I'm like, I would love to go to the UFC. Thank you so much. And he gives me his card and everything like that. So, boom, there you go, man. I'm finally, before I even know it, I'm in the UFC.
It's got to help ease the pain, but I mean, you're a guy. I mean, if you look at your fighting style, you're super aggressive. Like you're as alpha as they get when it comes to competing. And that loss, I'm glad it still stung though, because it means it meant something to you. Your UFC shot, April 27, 2013, UFC 159. You earned Fight of the Night bonus against Steven Siler.
Yeah, so I should have got Fight of the Night. We didn't get that bonus.
Oh, you didn't get that?
Nope. So here's the thing. All right. I got beat by Pat Healy again, and I didn't even fight Pat Healy. So, yeah. So here we go. It should have been a bonus, was not a bonus. Of course, me and Steven Seiler called for the bonus. Really good fight, man. He beat the hell out of me the first round. I beat the hell out of him the second round, and the third round was very close until I made a stupid mistake. He took my back and finished the round out on my back. So I lost the fight, but hell of a fight. Pat Healy fights the Jim Miller the same night, right? So keep in mind, I fought Pat Healy on the Final Strike Boards a couple months ago. Him and Jim Miller get fight of the night. Not only does him and Jim Miller get fight of the night, Pat Healy also gets the submission of the night too. So he gets 2 bonuses.
Oh.
And what's even worse, at this time, there's no set $50,000 bonus, right? So today, all the bonuses in the UFC are $50,000. So
sometimes 75, sometimes even 75. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that night they were 65.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Pat Healy walks out with 130 grand.
He beat me again. Didn't even fight me.
On top of his purse. I'll tell you about Pat Healy. That's clearly Dana White paying homage to somebody that put a lot of time in the independent grind and treated him with something that he should have got a long time ago.
All right. Here, you want to hear this? He failed the test for marijuana and lost all of it.
Oh, no, that's right. Did they take his performance bonuses away too?
Yep. No bonus, no fight of the night, no submission of the night, and no win bonus.
Oh, my F.
I know. God. So here's what they do, right? They take the submission of the night and they hand it down to Brian Caraway because Brian Caraway is the only guy to get a submission that night. So they gave Brian Caraway submission of the night. They said, we cannot take fight of the night from them because Jim Miller still has to get his fight of the night. But me and Seiler was like, hey, we'll split the other 65,000.
Yeah, we'll be righteous about it. We'll split it. Yeah, we're cool.
But no, they didn't give it to us, man. But yeah, it sucks for Pat Healy. But yeah, man, he lost it all.
You actually took that fight last minute as well. Am I correct?
Which one?
Seiler?
It was a short notice, but I want to say it was about a month. Well,
yeah.
It was like a 10-day notice.
Right. Well, you actually got released after that as well.
I did. So I lose that fight, and I get a phone call from Lex McMahon like the next day or the next couple of days, and he's like, "Hey, bud, just want to call you and let you know they're going to release you from the contract." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" Like I thought that I put on, good enough fights to where I would at least get the third shot, right? Because I'm still young. I'm still building. I want to say right now I'm like 26, 27 years old. He said, do you think you can make 135? And I'm like, no.
Oh, no way.
All right, well, here's the thing. Go back. He said, let's win a couple fights. And the UFC said they'll bring you back. I'm like, all right, man, whatever. So that's what I do, right? Get cut from the UFC, and I go back to the local circuit.
Oh, that stings. And you know what the problem is when you go back to that local circuit? It's not just finding fights, which would be difficult. You got guys showing up at your gym trying to prove to themselves that they belong in the, like you got belong in the UFC. Like at that point, you got to be real careful on who you even spar or roll with.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we keep our gym circle kind of small. Well, we used to. Now we're a lot bigger, but back then it was kind of small. So we didn't have a bunch of outsiders coming in. So we didn't have a huge problem with that. But of course, you have a huge problem trying to find a fight now because, I was 9-0 before I made it to UFC. Now I'm 9-2 and a former UFC guy, not easy to get fights.
No, let's talk about your wife, 2-time IBJJF champion.
Yep. So yeah, man, I met my wife, I want to say 2018, I want to say sometime around there. And turns out that she actually graduated with my sister. So we all went to the same school. So I actually met my wife. We started talking a little bit and we wind up getting together, and it turns out she's a college athlete. She played softball in college for Pensacola State. So, and I mean, she's got like that softball girl athletic build, right? She's like 4'11", but I mean, she's stocky, man. She got some guns. And we get together, I want to say sometime around that time, late 2018, 2019. And, she comes aboard and we start training jiu-jitsu. And of course, her being a natural athlete and a college athlete, turns out she's pretty damn good at it.
So you actually roped her into your world. It's not like you guys met at the gym.
Yeah, so no, I didn't meet at the gym. We started talking like through social media a little bit, and wind up getting together, a little bit later. And of course, I owned a gym at the time. So once we got together, she started coming to the gym with me. She started training, started helping out at the gym. And
so it's so much easier. Yeah. Having a female help somebody keep you organized. Oh, dude, what a godsend. Oh my God.
So yeah, she definitely helps out a lot.
That's really good, man. And, obviously not only a natural athlete, two-time IBJJF champion. Your phone call home from the Ultimate Fighter was pretty emotional. You could tell that there was a very, very strong bond between the two of you. Yeah,
for sure. And everybody keeps saying that. Everybody seems to really love that. And I mean, it is. We have a strong bond, she's been there for me every step of the way that she's been with me through all the ups and the downs, man. Because keep in mind, I go back to the UFC again here a little bit later. We'll talk about it. But, she's there with me through all of that. And, she's just a great person.
All right. You read off some wins. John LeBlanc, another last-minute replacement. You win by submission. You got Calvin Miller. You win by rear naked choke. And February 28th, 2014, Eric Marriott is your opponent. He's 22-7. Killed to Live Grindhouse, legendary old school gym. So, he's got a decent pedigree for your manager, Titan FC.
Yeah, for sure. So Lex gives me a call and he says, "Hey, bud, so check this out. Because I already won 2 fights. The UFC said, hey, go back, win 2 fights, we'll bring you back." So I win 2 fights. And I say, "Lex, I'm ready to go back to UFC, man." And he's like, "All right, bud, I'm going to call Sean Shelby." And he's like, "Yeah, they're still wanting you to get more fights." And I'm like, "Shit." But he's like, "Listen, we just bought Titan FC, the old Titan FC from HD Net days." And I'm like, "All right." He's like, "Look, we're going to rebrand it. It's going to be live on CBS Sports. You're on the card." So I'm like, "All right, that's cool." And he said, "Hey," he sent me a couple opponents, and Eric Marriott was one of those guys. And I started looking, I'm like, "Man, this dude's pretty good." And I'm like, "Give me that guy." So fighting Eric Marriott for my Titan debut. Eric Marriott's a guy that's fought Bellator, was on the Ultimate Fighter, fought to get into the house. I think he lost actually lost to Brian Caraway, who we talked about a little bit earlier. Fought Joe Warren in Bellator, and I mean, should have submitted Joe Warren several times. I mean, Eric Marriott was definitely legit, training out of Kansas City, Missouri with James Krause and all those guys. So yeah, man, it was a tough fight for my Titan debut, but I think taking that fight, picking the hard fight, very experienced, and getting a victory there was huge.
Absolutely. You got to get the decision. You're a proven gas tank. Lloyd Mix is your next opponent. Lloyd Mix is 14-4. Lloyd Mix Woodard Mix was a featherweight title eliminator, and you're 4-0 coming off of your Steven Seiler fight.
Yeah. So yeah, I fought Lloyd Woodard, and that's a guy that didn't scare me, but man, I was just so worried about that fight. This is a guy who actually submitted one of the Pitbull brothers in Bellator. Yep. All right. So he's
14-4. Yep. Cupcake, dog pound fight team, go getter. What happened?
This guy's good, man. So I'm thinking this is going to be a freaking war. This dude likes to come forward. He likes to fight. So, of course, that's the fights I like too. But I don't know. I was just worried about that fight. But I put it in a hard training camp, made the weight, show up to fight, and knock him out in 14 seconds. Inside leg kick, overhand right, finish with some ground and pound.
Bro, like on paper, outside of Healy and Seiler, like this guy is, checks a lot of boxes, and you get out of there in under 30 seconds.
Yeah. But now, something that actually happened in that fight, I actually broke my patella in that fight.
Did you really?
Yep. So when we first come out, we both throw that inside leg kick, and my knee and his knee hit. And I remember feeling like a weird pain. I'm like, oh, that hurt. So I said, fuck it, man. I'm going to throw the same thing back. So I threw the inside leg kick, and an overhand right lands, and it puts him down. So I jump on top, hit him a couple times, ref stops it. I go to jump on top of the cage. But whenever I put weight on my leg, I felt my whole knee say. So I run into the cage, and I hit the cage, and I got everybody on the cage like patting me, like congratulating me. And I'm like, hey, time out. My knee. They stop and look, and like, oh shit. So yeah, broke my patella in the fight. 14-second win.
It wasn't from the cage. It was actually from the actual exchange, huh? Wow.
It was from the weight. Whenever I dug that weight to launch myself onto the cage, I heard it. It completely tore off the bone.
Oh man. Right around this time, you got some personal issues going on too. Like I had read that you got full custody of your children. That is certainly something that's one, it's admirable, but that's a very difficult road to go down.
Yeah, tough times, man. And actually that would travel back to a little bit into my my first UFC stint. I was going through a lot of stuff like that with trying to get the custody of my kids for very good reason. And I had a lot of that. There were days where I couldn't even train for that fight for Steven Seiler because I had my kids and I could not leave them, because if I leave them, somebody would have been able to come and take them. So, and there were days where I just didn't train, man. There was days where I had somebody that don't hold mitts in the backyard for me to train for a UFC fight. So, but yeah, man, went through some tough times with that, but ultimately got the custody of my kids.
Yeah. As a guy that also, raised a child, help with my family and, obviously friends, not an easy position to be in, but it speaks volumes of your character.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I had to do. I couldn't, I wouldn't be able to go through life. And I don't think I would be where I'm at right now if I didn't have it.
No, absolutely not. Well, they keep lining up killers with you. I thought the UFC would have bit after that fight, but they asked you to fight one more time. They line you up with Desmond Green. He's 14-3 out of Kill Cliff. That's March 20th, 2015. Not an easy fight.
No, not an easy fight at all. And I remember Desmond Green being in Bellator, right? He was in the Bellator tournament, won a bunch of fights in Bellator. I want to say he was a semifinalist, maybe. I think he lost to Daniel Weichel. But I remember when he came to Titan FC and he got the instant title shot. He fought Miguel Torres from the old WC days and knocked out Miguel Torres in the first round to win the Titan FC Featherweight Championship.
Yeah, Torres, a 35-pounder. Past his prime at this point, but one of the best in the world, pound for pound.
But, I mean, back then, he was still pretty decent, right? Because that was in 2014, 2015 when he fought Desmond Green. And then, so coming off of this patella surgery and this knee injury, Lex McMahon, Jeff Aronson called me and said, hey, what do you think about us giving you the title shot against Desmond Green? Winner goes to the UFC. And I'm like, let's do it. Shit.
See, he keeps dangling that in front of you. Winner goes to the UFC, but you fight Andre Harrison again, who's the bull out of Belmore Kickboxing Academy. 6-0 as an AMI, 10-0 as a pro. You got a guy that's on a 16-fight win streak. He's never fought in the UFC, but if you look at his body of work, it's always PFL, always bigger events. It was just more of a guy that opted not to be in the UFC and be in other organizations.
Yeah, and like you said, I beat Desmond Green. Close decision. Yep. I get the win. And I remember them telling me that night, he came to the back and said, look, Sean Shelby sent me a text. He's taking the winner. So, he's getting us all pumped up to go back to the UFC, beat Desmond Green. And I'm talking to him later on that night. We're out having beers. And he said, hey, you want to defend your title or you want to go to UFC? And I'm like, man, look, I want to go to the UFC. He's like, all right. So I'm thinking I'm going to the UFC. He called a month later and he said, hey, bud, we need you to defend your title against Andre Harrison. He's like, listen, this is going to be our first fight, UFC Fight Pass. Dana White's going to be there. You win this, I think for sure you go back to UFC. And I'm thinking, oh, man, I thought I'm already going back to the UFC. So I'm like, all right, man. You know, I've seen Andre. I've talked to Andre. We was already on the same fight card a couple times. Cool guy. So I'm like, all right, I kind of already had my eye on this guy. So
nice. Here, you got Gregor Gillespie's training partner. His coach are Keith Trimble and Joe Scarola, both guys that are kind of legendary at producing pretty high-end talent.
Yep. And, man, look, Andre, super good wrestler, strong, can strike. He can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, he's not a good matchup for you, to be honest with you. Like the boxes you check are much different than the boxes he checks.
But yeah, so you know, I go out there and I drop a decision, lose my Titan Featherweight Championship to Andre Harrison. Competitive fight. I mean, it wasn't a bad fight. You know, I just made a lot of mistakes, got out wrestled for the most part.
You got pinned.
I think, yeah, going back, but man, it's like I thought that I was going to go to the UFC. So I mean, I don't know how motivated I was for that fight. But yeah, Andre beats me, right? Loses the championship. And then was almost like, well, I worked so hard. I built that win streak. Now I got to start all over because UFC definitely ain't going to take me down.
No, and you got to look at it this way, too. You hurt your patella on a highlight reel knockout. So you were out. You know, maybe that even hurt you. You know, maybe they would have taken you, but you were injured, so they couldn't put you in. You have almost a year off. Desmond Green, you take another almost year off after that, and you wind up after Desmond for Andre. I apologize. That's a quick turnaround. But after Andre, you go to Russia with Akhmat MMA, but there's almost a year in between that as well.
Yeah. So right after my Andre Harrison fight, my contract was up with Titan. Okay. So my contract was up with Titan. They never called me to re-sign me. I never heard anything really from Lex or Jeff. And then
Jeff Annenson, one of the promoters over there. Okay.
Yeah. So I never heard nothing from them. And then I think my management deal might have even been up. So at this time, I'm kind of like going free range. You know, I don't have a manager right now. I just lost to Andre Harrison, and I get a message on Facebook from a Russian guy asking me if I want to come fight in this tournament in Russia. And I'm thinking, might be good. And he's like, all right, so this is a tournament. First fight is 5-5. Second fight, 10-10. Championship like 25-25 or something like that. And I'm thinking, to me right now, that's pretty good money, you know. And don't forget, I still work a full-time job all through this time right now. Even my first UFC stint, full-time job.
And full-time father.
Full-time father also. So yeah, man, I'm struggling a lot at this time. And so
you never quit. You never quit, dude.
Man, I pushed hard every day and kept going.
Russia.
So yeah, and we're like, okay, even though it was very sketchy, but you know, I got a guy to send me the contract from Russia. Since I didn't have a manager, I actually called Charles McCarthy, who was the guy that seeked out. There we go. I actually called Charles McCarthy, who was the guy that seeked out and found me. And as I sent him the contract to go over it, he's like, man, it's not bad. He's like, just make sure they do everything right. So, yeah, they sent the plane tickets. They sent all the information, hotel, everything like that. And me and my coach, Javier, we flew out, went to Russia. Worst travel I've ever had, you know, and keep in mind, this fight's at 145 pounds. So I'm cutting weight. I want to say we had 4 layovers around 10 hours a piece or something like that. It literally took us 4 days to get there. So we get to Russia, and then
wait. So you went from Louisiana to New York, New York to where?
It could have been like Dallas or something. I can't remember everywhere. I do know once we got overseas, we stopped at Moscow. I think we stopped at Paris, maybe.
Germany is usually one too. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
but we stopped a couple of different places, and then when we land, right? So we land, and the guy is like, "Now we drive 6 hours," and we're like, "Oh, this dude's bullshitting," right? He wasn't. We got in this little bitty ass bus, and we drove for probably 7 hours. Finally get to the hotel, man. By the time we get there, it's the sun's coming up. It's like early morning, and our times are already off. So I get there and I just start to go to sleep. The phone rings. Nobody speak English around there. But the guy was trying to tell me, hey, come down. We got to take you to go do like a photo shoot. So they take us like to the soccer arena and we do some photo shoot, man. I'm like running on no carbs, no sleep, no nothing. And, that night we go out and we're trying to find a sauna and nobody speaks English, like I say. So the people are trying to tell us, across the street. So we go across the street and the venue's across the street. And there's soldiers that are on the walking. And keep on, we're in Chechnya, Russia. All right. This is not a very good part of Russia.
No. And dude, Ahmed MMA, although it's still around.
Yeah.
Let's just say there's some very capable human beings that are running that organization. And you need to be very careful.
Yeah, for sure. And man, once we got over there, we knew we were like, look, we're not messing with nobody over here. You know what I'm saying? We are trying to make it back home. So we go next door. We're trying to freaking find out where the sauna is. There's security guards with AK-47s or whatever. And we go up. And as soon as we start walking up, they come there like, no, leave. We're like, hey, man, look. My coach Raphael said, hey, we're fighters. And I'm like, oh, my God, Raphael. I was like, dude. Don't put your fist up to these dudes.
Yeah, you want to fight him?
They cock guns, man, and then we're like, oh, all right, no problem. We're out of here. So we finally find the sauna, man. I cut about 5 pounds. That leaves me with about 5 pounds left. I wake up the next morning, do an Epsom salt bath, and I'm dying. The worst weight cut I ever had in my life. Finally, man, I get out, and I'm like, Raphael, I said, if I'm not on weight, I don't think I'm going to make weight. I get out and I'm like 145.9. And I'm like, let's go. I'm going to weigh right now. So we go downstairs, we weigh, everything's good. That night we do like a big weigh-in party with the Russian dictator, which I can't remember his name. It's Ramzan something, but he's the man over there. Right. And I'm like,
he might be a man over there. He might be a war criminal over here.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's no joke. They even get a freaking HBO documentary about that guy. And I'm thinking,
yeah.
God, I was there. I went over there. I shook this guy's hand. So, yeah, it was crazy times. Maybe it's a good thing I lost the fight over there because if I would have won, I might not have came home. I don't know.
Well, how would you describe the fight and the audience and your experience afterward?
Oh, it was insane. Like, it was like a UFC fight. To them over there, that is the UFC, right? So, I mean, the place was big. The place was huge. I've even posted like my walkout and stuff on social media and Instagram. So we're walking down like this big flight of stairs and they got fire coming up and it was crazy, man. It was like, really, it should have been a lot more exciting to me if I wasn't scared to die over there. But it should have been better. But I should have enjoyed it more. But, I mean, it was cool. It was awesome to fight over there. I mean, I really enjoyed that part. And then, I lose the fight to another guy who is like one of the best fighters in the world. He won the Bellator tournament back in the day, beat a lot of guys in Bellator. And still till today has like a solid record. I want to say he's like 30-something-8, 30-something-7, and he lost to the same guy the last 2 times he lost. So I call him Frodo Kaspalayev. I can't say his first name, but definitely a legit fighter.
It's Megamedrasu Kazbalayev. Yes. Yeah. He was 22-6. You lose a decision to him. And those Russian trips, generally, they've got their system down. Lots of layovers, lots of driving, almost punish you. To be honest with you, had you had an experienced manager, which obviously you admit to that you didn't at this time, they would have demanded that the flight be direct or, no more than 2 flights and maybe 4 or 5 days ahead of time. That's kind of what you have to do there.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, at this time, like, I'm still inexperienced. I've been in the UFC, but I'm still an inexperienced fighter. And a lot of that inexperience is costing me some of these fights. But against Kaspalayev, I took no damage in the fight. I don't think I had a mark on my face, to be honest with you. But he won the fight, rightfully so. He definitely won. It wasn't like it was a close decision and they gave it to him because he's a Russian hometown guy. But so now I'm on a 2-fight losing streak. On the verge when I was on the verge of going back to the UFC. So 2-fight losing streak, just went to Russia. Good experience, glad I did it, but I'll never go back for that. It's got to be the UFC or something. And I'm without a manager. I'm without a home because my contract was up in Titan, not going back to Russia. So at this time, man, I'm just not knowing what exactly I'm going to do.
Yeah. That's not an easy place to be.
Yeah. So we get back home, me and my coach start talking and we're like, man, look, why don't we just reach back out to Lex and Titan, see if they want to sign you? Because actually I want to say when I announced my fight in Russia, Lex hit me up and I think he was kind of mad that I didn't hit him back up and say, hey, re-sign me. And I'm like, dude, you never reached out to freaking re-sign me.
Nah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
Anyways, I reached back out to them and they re-signed me to another contract and set me up a fight. And I want to say the fight they set up for me. And keep this in mind too, my last weight cut in Russia was very hard, very tough. So I told myself, I think I'm going to go back up to 55, man. I just need I need a new spark. I need something different. I'm on a 2-fight losing streak.
Kurt, if you don't mind me interjecting, in essence, Are you training to cut weight or are you training to learn? And sometimes when you've got a heavy weight cut, you're training to cut weight and you're not learning.
And see, that's exactly what it was. So I definitely was training to cut weight. So my training camps were always consistent of cutting weight. So it got to the point to where, like, it wasn't fun, right? And I'm like, dude, if it's not fun, then I don't know if I want to do it. So I went back to 55.
Yeah, that's smart. Well, look at your run. You go back to Titan, June 10, 2016. Luciano dos Santos, you win by KO. He's 10-7, so it's a good little return fight. Let's not damage his confidence. Bring him in.
Yep.
Yosdenis Cedeno, the Pink Panther. He's from the Blackzilians. 10-5-1. That's December 2nd, 2016. Bro, that's a legit fight, man.
No, for sure. That's a guy that was already in the UFC. Won fights in the UFC. And I remember when Titan FC signed him, I watched him fight when the Titan FC signed him. So whenever they threw him at me, and of course I'm starting to get some fights back now because I beat Luciano dos Santos, who is a good striking coach for ATT in South Florida, Coconut Creek. I beat Luciano dos Santos. We reached out to Sucker Punch at this time, and I signed with Sucker Punch. So when I fought Luciano dos Santos, I still had no manager. But after that fight, I signed with Sucker Punch Entertainment, Brian Butler, Brian Hamper, those guys. And they're like, all right. So, they wanted to bring me in. So they booked me against Yosdenis Cedeno. I almost went back to the UFC before I even fought Cedeno. As soon as I signed with them, they called me and said, hey, so look, man, if you want to drop to 45, I'm going to put your name in the hat. We might get you back in the UFC for next week. And I'm like, all right, do it. I'll cut the weight. Wind up not happening. But right then and there, I'm like, dude, I'm already back on the freaking radar, man. I just signed with Sucker Punch. They already almost got me back to the UFC. I'm getting those calls to where, like, it's showing me some hope. Like, the UFC is being mentioned. so I step up, I fight your Dennis and Daniel, put on a hell of a performance, get the victory by finish.
Rear naked choke.
Rear naked choke, I think, was the third round, but that was a fight that I dominated from start to finish, over a very tough guy.
Yeah, Pink Panther. He was 10-5-1 at the time. After those two losses, in particularly Russia, like that brutal ride home,
Yeah.
a lot of guys would have hung it up.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that ever really crossed my mind to hang it up, but I was at a point to where I was like, what am
Fork in the road.
Where am I going to go?
Let's look at that fork in the road. Quit, job yourself out for some paydays, or get on the horse again. And that last option is probably the most difficult of the three, truth be told.
Yeah, for sure. But, I felt like I had to. I felt like I wasn't done. I'm still young at this time, right? So, and then when I got that deal re-signed with Titan, I was actually making some pretty good money with Titan. So I'm like, that's cool, man. I'm going to stay fighting in Titan for a little while. I signed with my new management, so I just need to keep winning, and I think I'll go back to UFC. And not only will I go back to the UFC, maybe I'll go back to UFC at 155 pounds now and see if that run could be any different.
Yeah, a little bit of life. And you can eat occasionally on top of that. Food that you actually enjoy.
Absolutely. So,
bro, would you think you were being targeted by the Blackzilians? Because your next opponent's JZ Cavalcante. JZ Cavalcante 21-9-1. We just had JZ on the other day, and I'll tell you this right now. JZ, at one point, pound for pound in his weight class, one of the best guys in the entire world. JZ Cavalcante is the real deal, man.
So, I don't think I was being targeted by the Blackzilians. But what it was is Titan moved their home base down to South Florida. Okay. And so Titan starts signing like a lot of these good fighters. And once I go back to 55, they also bring in Pat Healy, right? A former guy that I fought a while back. And Pat Healy fights JZ Cavalcante for the lightweight championship of the world, for the Titan lightweight championship. JZ knocks Pat Healy out cold in the first round. Actually, that was the same night that I fought Luciano dos Santos. So I remember after that, I told my coach Raphael, I said, man, I want JZ for the title. And my coach was like, oh, man, I don't think we should do that right now. Why don't we just give some more time? And I'm like, all right, well, Titan gives me Luciano dos Santos. And then after that win, I called out. I said, hey, I want the championship. So I kind of call out the champion, which JZ actually fought Freddie Assunção for the title. Freddie Assunção guillotined Pat Healy in like the third round and put him to sleep. And then kind of vacates because he never comes back. So then Titan wants to make that match with me and JZ for the interim Titan FC lightweight championship.
Dude, JZ Cavalcante, genuinely one of the best human beings I've ever dealt with, man.
Yeah. So, man, I love that fight. That was a fight that I wanted for a long time. That was kind of a fight that my coach Raphael wanted me to turn down for a long time. And then finally I'm like, man, it's time I fight JZ. I want the Titan belt and I want to go back to the UFC. So he finally let me take that fight.
Yeah, JZ Cavalcante, battling injuries right now, almost pushing himself too hard. Absolute legend in the sport. One of my favorite interviews that we've done this year. You beat JZ, you knock him out in the fourth round. You really stayed on like the edge of his range, and you pretty much stayed out of his mid-range as often as you could. You always kept him at the end of your fist, man. Yeah,
look, at this point in time, I'm starting to grow as a fighter. I'm starting to find my real skill, So that's why I knew I was ready, man. You seen what I did to Luciano, and then what I did to Dennis, and then stepping up, taking that fight with JZ. I felt like I started feeling like, okay, I finally belong in here with some of these guys, especially after the performance that I had with JZ.
Dude, fantastic. You called to the Dana White Tuesday Contender Series. That's July 11, 2017. Matt Bassett. You stop him in the first round, and it becomes a no contest. How disappointed are you, and what took place?
So, man, yeah, definitely disappointed about that because that's definitely a victory that I earned. So, of course, after that JZ fight, I'm expecting to go straight to the UFC, right? But my manager, Breann, hits me up, and he said, hey, so I got good news. He's like, we get an opportunity for the UFC. Okay. So I'm like, okay. He's like, look, man, you're going to headline the very first Contender Series. So I'm like, all right, cool. And he's like, we need you to win the fight. You know, you win the fight, I'm pretty sure you're in. I'm like, okay. But he said, it's at 145 pounds. And I'm like, oh, shit. I thought I'm going to roll at 55. But, you know, I'm going to take whatever opportunity presents itself. So I make 145 pounds. I fight Matt Bassett on the Contender Series. But here's the thing, right? You're fighting in Las Vegas. You're not under USADA. Now, last time I fought in UFC, there was no USADA. So this time I'm back, or I'm coming back. There is USADA. So in USADA, you are not allowed to have any kind of IV rehydration, right? Because a lot of fighters do it. You know, you have a hard weight cut, you take an IV and you rehydrate. So, okay, we're going through weigh-ins, and even my guy Scotty said, hey, man, look, we're not in USADA. You know, we're going to make this weight cut to 145 pounds again. You want an IV? I'll bring it. Because like I said, he's a paramedic. He's a fireman, you know. He can get the stuff, and he always hooks me up with an IV. So I'm like, okay, cool. Even I tell everybody at the weigh-ins that I'm like planning to do an IV for rehydration. Smooth weight cut, easy weight cut, one of the best weight cuts I ever had.
So you even make it known. You make it known that that's what you plan on doing.
Sure. For sure.
And there's no response from anybody you're talking to.
No, nobody told me, hey, well, you know, that's not legal here, right? Because I figured, I know it's not with USADA, but we're not under USADA. We're just under the Las Vegas Athletic Commission, Boxing Commission.
And there's no pullback. There's nobody. Oh.
Nope. So nobody says no. I even check on like a checkbox that I will use an IV. So nobody tells me nothing.
So you know what? I bet you the only reason you get dinged is because you told on yourself. If USADA So if USADA didn't test you, that means they're going by your paperwork.
Well, not only that, I even told on myself in further detail, right? So after the weigh-ins, I'd take an IV for rehydration. And I just take like one saline bag. The weight cut wasn't bad. I just did it to do it, you know, because I thought that I could. Fight goes my way. I knock him out in the first round.
Goes your way. Highlight reel.
Yeah.
You've come.
So, I mean,
you have arrived.
For sure. You know, and I get the contract. Dana White, here's the contract. So I'm going to the UFC. I signed my UFC contract. USADA calls me to start putting me in the USADA testing, and they start asking me questions. And I'm like, yeah, I did a IV for the last fight. They're like, wait, what?
Wait, how far afterward was this conversation?
Not even a month, maybe 2 weeks.
So you're talking 2 weeks later. Jeff Nowitzki, this guy really gives a shit about fighters, ladies and gentlemen. Never mind McGregor. Never mind John Jones. This IV. This is the instance we're going to make an example out of somebody. Go ahead.
So, yeah, man. They
strip your win. They strip your win.
So, and actually, I remember Jeff Nowitzki. He wrote me up something. He's like, look, man, maybe I had to do like a court hearing. I had to call into a court hearing and kind of like plead my case. But I'm like, what am I going to plead? I mean, I took the damn IV. So, yeah, I called
here's my paperwork checking that I took the ID. You know, here's the conversations I had. They're making a big deal out of it. Nobody else. Yep.
So, yeah, I told on myself. There was no failed test. There was no nothing like that. So they turn around, they fine me $900, suspend me for 9 months, and overturn my win to a no contest.
Scumbags.
So yeah, and then of course I was labeled.
Yeah, please don't comment. Listen, don't comment on my little sidebar comment. You got to work with these people. Go ahead. This is all me. It has nothing to do with Kurt. So go ahead, bro. I apologize. I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, but then I started getting labeled by a lot of people as, oh, this guy's a freaking cheater. He's cheating, and I'm like,
well, Kurt,
how is that cheating?
Kurt, are you aware that EPO, the drug that allows you to get super cardio, is not one of the boxes that they check for with USADA? And when TJ Dillashaw got caught, it was actually from the state, because his former teammates were constantly telling USADA never tested for it because it was too expensive.
Right.
So the state commission had to test for it. So now you've got people that have actually failed USADA tests that still don't get checked for EPO. But your IV, that's a problem.
Yeah, I know. So, and it's like, didn't do nothing in the fight. I ended the fight in the first round. So it's not like it was a war that went all the way to the third round and I had a cardio advantage because, I took an IV the night before.
Here, what's your manager say about all this? What's his response?
So here's the thing, man. I mean, they was with me 100%. Even Sean Shelby in the UFC was with me 100%. Sean Shelby said, man, look, don't worry about it. He's got his contract. Do his 9 months. We'll book him for a fight. They never took my win bonus back from the Ultimate Fighter or from the Contender Series or anything like that. I got all my money. I want to say my management sucker punched. I think they even paid my fine. And so really, I lost 9 months of my, what would you call it? Because
just your time. Yeah, just your time. Just 9 months. Yeah.
I lost 9 months when I had that momentum. I lost 9 months of momentum. That's what I was looking for. Right, because I'm coming off all these fights and I'm looking good, man. I beat JZ, I beat Yo Dennis, I beat Matt Bissett for the.
Well, dude, let's look at Bissett. I mean, you're talking about a 7-fight win streak with wins over. He knocked out Kevin Crooms, currently on the UFC roster, and went by the Mangler. You were actually out of underdog BJJ. I mean, dude, Bissett, he's a gritty little veteran, and you finished.
Oh, he was good. Yeah. He was good. I definitely took that fight serious. I knew how dangerous he was. He fought Bellator many times, fought former UFC veterans, beat former UFC veterans. And he was a guy that I think the UFC was really bringing in there to beat me. You heard Sean Shelby talk a little bit on the interview right when we were walking out. And he was saying, hey, Matt Bissett's a guy that could have been here, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I think they brought him in thinking he was going to beat me. And wind up getting the win and getting the contract.
Yeah, it was a holy shit moment, in my opinion. Like that was, main event, first Contender Series, which is incredibly popular right now. And like you brought it home, man. Like you did everything that you were supposed to do.
Yeah, for sure. So good moment. I want to say that was a good highlight of my career, man, because, I remember after that win, I'm celebrating with everybody in the back. I got my UFC contract, and I'm finally back to the UFC. I did it. I'm here. And but then boom, I get hit with the 9 months, so I don't fight for 9 months, but I still got a UFC contract, so I'm still happy.
Okay. You don't quit again after taking a 9-month suspension. You get brought into the UFC. Ronnie Barcelos, 11-1. Man, that uppercut did you in. He landed that repeatedly, something he saw on film. Shane Burgos, a fight that you were winning. You get caught in an armbar. Thiago Moises, he's 11-3. Man, bro, you go 3-0. 0-3. You go 0-3 in the UFC. You get released. You still don't quit.
I don't know what quit means.
There's something wrong with you, man.
Yeah, man. So I don't know the word quit, but in between winning the Contender Series and getting that 9-month suspension, that's actually where I meet my wife, my current wife now. So we get together. So now I'm starting to get some stabilization at home. I got somebody that's coming in and being a mother to my kids and
something
stuff
you ain't
like
ever
that.
had. Something you ain't ever had, man.
So I'm feeling good, man. Like I'm training every day. I got her now with me, training every day. We're running the gym. I get the phone call to fight Ione Barcelos. My weight is good. Keep in mind, because I was planning on going back to the UFC at 155 pounds. Now I'm back at 145 pounds. My weight's looking good. My training's looking good. I take that fight serious. It's just, I don't know if I was off that night. Which actually that fight was one hell of a fight. Me and Barcelos put on a war. I did get fight of the night for that fight.
Barcelos is legit, man. Barcelos is legit. You win another 2 fights. One of your opponents on the independent grind after the UFC, Damonte Robinson.
Yep.
Why don't you talk about what took place with him?
Okay, so yeah, man. Of course, after getting released from the UFC for a second time, right now COVID's hitting. So COVID's shutting things down. You're seeing what's happening to go on in the MMA world with empty arenas and the UFC doing these shows with nobody in the arena. And finally, we're able to kind of get back. So, my managers, Breann, Hamper, and Butler called me one day and they're just like, hey, we got you a deal with XFC. All right. Now, this is the old XFC that was on, Access TV. They were on TV back in the day. They're being rebranded. They're going to come back. They're going to be on NBC Sports. So it's almost like that same road where we were taking with Thigpen, right? But now this is XFC on NBC Sports. So I'm like, all right, cool. And it's turning out they're like, okay, so they're going to do super fights and they're going to do tournaments. So they're like, man, I'm trying to get you in the tournament, but I might have you in a super fight. Well, waited a couple weeks, nothing, didn't hear nothing. Finally, he calls me and says, hey, got you in the tournament. So I'm like, all right, cool. So he sends me the guy I'm fighting. He's like 18-5. And I'm like, all right, I like that. I looked the guy up and he's a legit striker, but no wrestling, no jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, perfect, man. Because if I want, I just take the guy down and hopefully submit him or beat him until the ref pulls me off.
There's a path. There's a clear path to victory. Yeah.
So I like it. I see all the guys in the tournament. So I'm like, all right, cool. I like this. So we have our first fight in Atlanta, Georgia. I want to say this is in November 2020. States and cities are just starting to open back up where you can go to like events and stuff. So the launch of XFC starts. It's a public traded company. Everybody's really high on it. You're supposed to be getting like shares and stuff as a fighter. They do a press conference and everything's feeling good. And man, I'm feeling like, oh man, this is cool because there's no hopes of me going back to the UFC, right? Nobody goes back to the UFC 3 times. And I just did my second stint. So I'm not even thinking about going back to the UFC. I'm thinking about, trying to win this tournament because supposedly I want to say they were paying $2,500 to show, $2,500 to win in the first fight, 45 and 45 in the second fight, and 5 and 20 in the finals. So you get to the final, it's a good chance you make $25,000. That's a pretty good payday for not being in the UFC. Not to mention they're giving out bonuses. Like you're getting fight of the night bonuses and performance of the bonuses that's around $2,500 a bonus. Also, you're getting like 10 to 12,000 shares of the company with a bonus. So, and I'm like, okay, and the company's worth like 25 cents right now a share. So I'm like, all right, man, I'm thinking this could build up a little bit. I like it, and they're treating us like kings. The hotel that they put us in Atlanta, Georgia was one of the best hotels I've ever stayed in, almost like a condo or a suite. There's a Ruth Chris steakhouse in there that's you and your coaches get that's what you get. You get $25 a day or $50 a day per diem. And at night, you get to go and just say, hey, you got a selective menu, but it's Ruth Chris. And then you get a 6-ounce sirloin or some stuffed chicken. Just go, hey, my room is 212, Kurt Holobaugh. Okay, we'll bring it up to your room. Free Ruth Chris. So I'm like, dude, this is legit. So I go out, I fight the fight, knock out, what's his name? It's a Aruba guy from Dutch kickboxer. Oh, forgetting the guy's name. But I go out and I knock him out in the first round, hit him with big punches, some knees, knock him out, get my first win since being released from the UFC. Which of course it was probably a year or so off because of COVID and all of this.
Yes, Yohario Boy, by the way.
Joserio
Joserio Boy.
Boy. Yep, that's it. So yeah, man, I get a victory.
26 seconds. 26 seconds. Yep.
And the cool thing, this is a tournament going on, so I'm getting to watch these guys that I might fight. So I'm liking what I'm seeing. I beat Jazero Boye. I move on to the
Verdugo, Jose Luis Verdugo.
Well, I was supposed to fight a guy named Scott Hudson that also fought that night. He fought a guy from Team Alpha Male. He beat a guy and he moved on. So I'm supposed to fight Scott Hudson in the semifinals. Okay. Scott Hudson pulls out the fight about 2 weeks before the fight, or maybe 3 weeks before the fight. And Jose Verdugo replaces Scott Hudson. I want to say Scott Hudson was like 11-5. He won, I think he won by decision. But he fought a guy that was like 15-10 or 15-15. I don't know. So you can clearly look at my side of the bracket. You can look at these other guys' side of the bracket. One side's way more advanced than the other. So they gave me all the guys with 18-5. And then I fought Verdugo, which was like 19-9. And I get a second round knockout over Verdugo. So that springs me up to the finals. Well, that same night, Kenny Cross is another guy that they're trying to build, right? He's on the other side. He gets a finish, I want to say in the first round or the second round. So he actually gets hurt. He tears his Achilles, pulls out of the tournament. They replace him with Damonte Robertson. So Damonte Robertson fights a guy named Tom O'Connor in the semifinals. The same night I faced Verdugo. Damonte Robertson beats Tom O'Connor. I beat Verdugo. That sets us up the finals, right? And this is a 5 to show and 20 to win. So this is a $25,000 fight. And the promoter calls me and he's like, hey, do you want to do this fight in Michigan or do you want to do this fight in Cancun, Mexico? And I said, shit. And actually the day for Cancun, Mexico was my birthday. So I'm like, Cancun for sure, man. I can use a trip to Mexico. So boom, they said it. Doesn't happen. And get this, me and Damonte Robertson are both under Sucker Punch. So we're both managed by the same company. And we're both calling like every day because they're just holding out, not doing a show. And they do a little show in Michigan. We don't fight on it. Well, Damonte Robertson actually has a bad work accident. Falls at work, breaks both of his legs, and I think breaks his back. So he's paralyzed from now the waist down.
Oh.
So, of course, I mean, that fight never happens. I wind up getting a release from XFC. And I don't know Damonte Robertson's status right now. Sometimes I try to keep up with him on Instagram, but I don't think I follow him. But, yeah, I know he went through that bad injury. I hope he's doing well. I'm hoping, things are not permanent like that. But, honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, it just wasn't meant to be. Yeah, you've hit so many roadblocks in your career. It's incredible. And then you take 2 years off and you wind up on The Ultimate Fighter. You're there for the third time, brother. You're there for the third time. What the
Well, I signed with another organization too. I signed with EagleFC, Khabib Nurmagomedov's organization out there in Miami. I signed a good contract. He's paying like 10-10. He's paying UFC money. So I signed my contract with him. Never get to make my debut. I even have one of my students, one of my guys that signed with Ali and Dominance, right? And Ali and Dominance, that's their organization, right? They're over it. So they fly my guy out to fight.
What's your guy's name?
Dennis Hughes, DJ Hughes. So he fights on the Eagle card. And I go out there with him. I was supposed to fight on that card. And you know who I was supposed to fight? Or is who they offered me to fight. They offered me to fight Roosevelt Roberts, another guy that was on the Ultimate Fighter with us, who is now a good friend of mine. But, Eagle offers that. And, of course, I say yes. But then they come back and they're like, no, they gave him to, I want to say Almeida or something. So I didn't get to fight. But I see Roe down there. I see him fight. So I'm like, man, this is the guy I'm supposed to fight. My guy DJ fights. I talked to Ali because now Ali says, hey, see you in July. We're putting you on July. So I'm like, all right, cool. So then there's talks of me fighting Kevin Lee, who was their first signee. And they're like, yeah, man. Ali said, he mentioned you fighting Kevin Lee at 165, and they're going to pay you like 60 grand, 30 or something like that. And I'm like, that's
Run
me.
it.
I'm in.
Run
I'll
it.
do it. Well, as you know, long story short, Eagle stopped doing shows. They hit me with that opportunity to the Ultimate Fighter. I take it. I go. Here we are.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Throw a couple names, and then we're getting out of here, too. We've taken way more than enough time. Brian Butler, your manager, I thought he did an amazing job when he helped induct Jens Pulver into the last Ultimate Fighter. He was a little nervous, you can tell, but he was nervous because he actually genuinely cared.
Right. No, man, Brian's such a good guy. Like I said, I don't know exact years, probably 2017 or something like that when I signed with those guys. But, man, hey, those guys never gave up on me either. Throughout everything that's happened, getting cut from the UFC again, they still presented me with good opportunities. Every time I call them, they answer the phone. So I can't say enough good things about those guys.
Ethan Hughes.
Ethan Hughes, DJ Hughes' brother, which one we just mentioned fought for Eagle. So Ethan's DJ's younger brother, still very young. I want to say, if I'm guessing, man, he's probably 22, 23. He stepped up. I got him a fight on Bellator maybe 2 years ago. He stepped up, fought a Olympian in Bellator, beat the Olympian. He was like a plus 800 dog in that fight, wins the fight. Ali and those guys see that, and they want to sign Ethan. So Ethan says, okay, well, can you sign my brother too? So they wind up signing both of them. So, yeah, Ethan Hughes, Bellator vet. He lost his last fight in Bellator, but he tore his ACL in the first round and currently is recovering from ACL surgery.
Yeah. Brandon Allen.
Brandon Allen, man, is a guy that I was training with Brandon Allen when he was 12 years old. And as he started to grow up, right, we still trained together a lot. And then he wound up departing from us and going out to gyms like Duke Rufus. And now he's over at Killcliff. But, I mean, Brennan's done his thing, man. Happy for Brennan. He's made a huge name for himself, and he's definitely in top running to be possibly one of the next UFC middleweight champions.
Yeah, absolutely. And why don't we end this with the guy that put us together, a guy who, man, very impressive to talk to, Preston Thigpen.
Yeah, so I met Preston years back, man, when I first opened my gym. I want to say probably back in 2016. So Preston come and sign his son up, his son Jason. So I want to say he signed his son up when he was like 10 years old. All right. So his son is about to be 18, I think. So I think he's a senior in high school or about to be a senior. And, he was here every day with his son while I trained his son in jiu-jitsu. And Preston came to me one day and he's like, hey, man, I think I want to start training. So I'm like, all right, yeah, awesome, man. Let's start doing it. So we started training and we take off from there, man. Preston's a very good mind for the sport, knows a lot about the sport, knows a lot about the history of the sport, watches a lot of jiu-jitsu, has always watched the UFC or any kind of MMA for that matter. He actually is now a purple belt under me in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's one of my assistant MMA coaches. He travels with us. He corners all of my guys. All of my guys consider Preston one of their coaches. Good guy, great guy to be around. Preston Thigpen.
Kurt, let me tell you something, man. You surround yourself with winners. You can tell a lot about somebody with who they surround themselves with. And you consistently, you've had some bumps in the road in the past, but you consistently made adjustments, and now you've got 2 gyms right now.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a big thanks to my wife too, man, because like I said, when we first got together, I was still working full-time job. I quit working my full-time job after I fought Raoni Barcelos and got the fight of the night. So I got the 50,000 from them, and I told my wife, I said, hey, you know, my head coach, Raphael, wants to sell me a gym in Franklinton, Louisiana that he opened for other people to run, which wasn't doing well. I said, let's take a chance. Let's buy this gym. So we bought the gym. I wanted my kids to go to a good school. So we started looking at schools in Franklinton, really good school. So I'm like, all right. So we bought a house in Franklinton. So now we have 20 acres and a house in Franklinton, got a small farm, horses, dogs, pig, chickens. And yeah, so now we live out in Franklinton. We have 2 gyms. Both gyms are doing very well. And, you know, me and my wife just running gym, competing. She's actually competing Friday. We're heading out to Vegas Wednesday for another IBJJF World Shot. So we'll be down there in Vegas this weekend.
That's fantastic, man. Kurt, sincerely, you gave us 2 hours. Dude, your career is incredibly fascinating. And your just inability to say no or be undetermined to complete your goal is something that everybody around you notices. Thank you so much for your time, bro.
Yeah, for sure. And then, oh man, the thing is heavy. Oh, got the Ultimate Fighter flag. Oh,
that's it.
It's, man, I can last about 20 pounds, but yeah. But yeah, man, I appreciate the time. Thank you for having me on. So,
Kurt, we'll be in touch, buddy. Thank you so much, man. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our career deep dive with Kurt Holobaugh. If you really enjoyed this content, guys, we've got almost 200 other episodes. It's the exact same format. Everybody kind of fits into like the same formula that we do, and we just try to document history. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I do. If you're from the Louisiana area, we got Jason Knight, we got Rich Clemente, Tim Kruder, and now we just added another one from the Louisiana area, and Kurt Holobaugh, somebody that just commands respect with every room he goes into. So if you guys can like, share, subscribe. If you guys are on YouTube, I don't even want to talk about what's happening over there. They just kicked off like 500 of our subscribers, and we're on the verge of being demonetized in regards to time allowance and downloads. If you guys could please just leave a comment, help us with the algorithm with YouTube. If you're on iTunes, if you can leave us a review, we need about 200 reviews. We're at 50 right now. We've had about 45,000 downloads from iTunes. So there's a bunch of people listening to this right now that haven't done that for us. If you guys could please do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. So like I said, like, share, subscribe. If you guys can post this in other areas, especially in Reddit, greatly appreciated. Thank you, guys.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.